Welcome to Spiritual and Sassy, the podcast where we bleed deep soul wisdom with authentic confidence.
We're your host,
Tressa
and Myra, and together we'll explore the mystical side of life, challenge societal norms and programming, and embrace our inner power.
Whether you're on a spiritual journey or just love a little sass, this space is for you.
Let's dive in and light up the world with a little more love.
Yeah, look at us. Hey, I don't have a hat on today, Myra.
No, you don't.
It's a work day today.
Yeah, no,
Although this hairdo, y'all, if you're on YouTube, the wind today in Wyoming was just brutal. I felt like I'd walk out. It was like a whirlwind. What do you call that? I don't know, like a tornado above my head.
Yeah. A little air devil or whatever.
Yeah, a little air devil.
Yeah. No, I'm the opposite. Today was one of those days where I felt like everything, I don't know, I was too calm, I guess. Things were too chill. And then I came back to, work, and Nola's on spring break. So I've got both kids with me right now.
Okay.
And so it's been a party. But yeah, I'm totally like, I threw a little something on to get ready. And so I feel like you can smell me through the video or through the audio. It's just so warm and I just want to be outside, and I am really tan right now. And it brings me so much joy because I'm just naturally walking around, and enjoying life. And I think I've hid Easter eggs about 356,000 times.
Yeah, well, the first thing I noticed when we got online was here you are looking gorgeous and tanned with your white frickin' tank top. And here I am in flannel shirt.
Bundled up.
I've got my wool coat over there in the corner.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So I'm absolutely jealous because I am ready for some sun, some tan, some being outside.
Yeah, I really think it'd be great to do an episode around the seasons and like your body and syncing your body to the seasons. We've talked some about it in episodes, but this is the one thing that I truly think naturally I struggled with in Wyoming is North Carolina has 4 seasons, and we might not have a heavy snow, but there might be some snow where it's still cool, enough to turn a fireplace on, or especially where I live. And I really struggled not experiencing true seasons. And so when it was April and it was still snowing, I was confused. And I feel like it just really messed with me. I was like, oh my gosh. So I am beyond grateful to just this morning. I woke up and everybody is on spring break, like I said, and I went outside and I had a cup of coffee on my front porch and I just listened to the birds and nature and smelt the dew. I smelt dew this morning. I smelt the pine and the dew, and it was beautiful. I was like, I had this moment. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such one of the most wonderful places in the world to live. But then it like, I don't know, I was really surrendering to nature this morning and just listening, just taking a moment.
Yeah.
And it goes into the episode today too. I was coming off of just being at peace and the calm. And so I was just taking it in, but it reminded me of a cool morning in Saratoga. It was in the fall and it was at the resort. We were traveling and I was with you, Tressa, and I had sat outside and it was like September. So that time of year, and the same smell, but different, and it was just so beautiful. And I remember thinking what a blessing it was for me to live where I was living too, so it's just really cool to be in gratitude in different places and different seasons of your life, or different areas. Yeah, I was smelling the dew and the trees and it was great. I was like, I need to bottle this up. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you talk about like the true 4 seasons of your perspective growing up in North Carolina. And, me being in Wyoming or Utah for most of my life, that's one of the things I say about living here is I get to enjoy the 4 seasons. Now, sometimes in Wyoming, you enjoy them all in one day.
Yeah. Very true.
But, it's interesting your perspective there too. We just have, it's been pretty chilly, but, maybe I'll start bringing in spring and then, we'll get summer by July.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. There's nothing like summer in Wyoming.
Yeah. Every place has its beauty, when you look for it. It's just different perspectives. And we get used to what we know.
Exactly. Yeah. Because Yeah, my skin was enjoying it too. I'm like,
I'll
oh, this
bet. Yeah.
humidity in the air. Ooh, I went back 5 years.
Yeah.
My
I am
feet,
jealous of that. It's definitely dry here.
yeah, my feet aren't cracking. Woo, you know. So yeah,
Well,
well,
good. Yeah, we're just getting out. Yesterday was Easter. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, yesterday was Easter, and so by the time y'all hear this episode, it'll be maybe like just a week after, I
Hmm.
think, or so, or
Yeah.
but yeah, yesterday was Easter, and before we started the episode, uh, like we've said before, Tress and I kind of spitball and talk and see where we're going to go with today's episode. And I was talking mostly about, for me, the day, the moment, the experience really just touches mostly on peace. What does peace bring? What does peace mean to me? What is peace? What is even peace, and I think like even saying it was just so weird and cliche to me. And I posted on Instagram a picture of me and my son, and I wrote the caption and I said like love in my heart and peace in my soul. And I'm like, damn, I sound terrible. I was like, it was very authentic, but I think like, wow, that sounded a little cheesy, but is it cheesy? It's not. It's so simple and it's so true. And so I don't know. I took time yesterday to really think about it and what it meant to me. And for most people, it means different things. And
Hmm.
Easter represents a whole lot. And usually if you're Christian, it centers around Christ and what is the explanation of his death and his resurrection. And then there's a lot of symbolism that ties into that depending on your belief system. And ultimately, I feel the whole situation, regardless of belief systems, is that this man, Christ, and what Christ taught of love, or his purpose, that he was here, his teachings of service, of coming here, being a man on this earth, died. And when he died, if you, depending on your beliefs too, some believe he died for your sins, some believe he died so that we can live again. Ultimately, some kind of go together in both. It depends on your upbringing or what you've been told. And to me, though, I'm not going into that. But where I'm going with it is you think about it for many, many ways. But regardless, this person who represents so much to so many people, who represented something to those people then, and what to people now, died. And then in those moments, if you look at it like the number 3 or 3 days, you think, okay, so this was a very dark time for those people and for this person. But 2 days later, he was born again, or he was resurrected, and he could live again. So to me, that symbolizes the story. The message to me represents peace and hope. So it was dark, but Sunday came and there's now hope. So for me in my life, I reflected, it's been a full year since I've moved back. Easter last year was a lot different. And I think about all the things. And so to me, the whole message that I took from this weekend was the fact that even when there's dark times, some say like Sunday comes, but to me, it's the light comes. So even though there's a dark time, there's hope, because in the moment on Friday, those people only knew what they knew. But come Sunday, everything was in play. It was a completely changed hope existed. It began anew. So for me, that's what it means to me. It really means peace. This weekend, I took a lot of time to really reflect, and a lot of my meditation was around peace. I felt really called to clarity, peace. I've really shifted the way I'm thinking about things. Obviously, every week I shift that, but doing the podcast has really helped me to think about like, okay, what am I looking for? I'm looking for a feeling, and that's what we tell you guys too. You're looking for a feeling. You want to feel something. It's not really the thing. It's what does that thing bring you? Is it joy, peace, hope, clarity,
Hmm.
freedom, etc., security. And so this week, our weekend specifically, that's where I was at. My intention was peace. In my meditation, the intention has been a lot around peace, clarity, hope, like I said. And I really felt that. And I felt that a lot yesterday. And mostly what I did was I spent time with a friend that I've known since elementary school. So pretty much my whole life now, right? And her family. And then I went and spent time with my family. And the whole day was just a lot. If you really think about it, we got up We went over there, did lunch, Easter eggs, the whole shebang, you know, you name it.
Mm.
And then we turn around and Draco didn't sleep, I think maybe 20 minutes. Then we come back, then we turn around and leave again. And I'm going like 20 minutes one way, 20 minutes the other. But no one complained about it. You know, we just all went and did. And it was just really nice because the other half of what I felt yesterday was connection. My phone died at some point. I didn't even
That's
post
great.
pictures on Easter or anything. Like trust you texted me and I was like, oh my God, I hadn't even talked to people. Like I was like, happy Easter, you know? And it was just one of those things like nobody really even reached out other than like the hello, happy Easter, you know, like normal people that would call me or want to talk or things like that just didn't happen. And like I said, my phone ended up dying and I didn't even realize it. And it was just this sense of everything around me could be this way or that way or whatever. But in those moments, like I'm alive, I have breath, I'm connecting with people I love, different people at different levels, different relationships. You know, with my friend, it's her parents' home, because she doesn't live in the area. So she came up. And so I'm even with her parents who I've known for years. And then I'm with someone who knew one of my ex-lovers. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And so different people at different seasons, but it was still beautiful. And we had wonderful conversations. And I'm with my children, then I'm with my aunt and my uncle and my nanny who's 89. Like, and so I sit in those moments because every moment I cherish and I cherish that time. And so all the worries that I had were just gone. It's like it genuinely was melted away. I wasn't worried about where I needed to be. I just did it. I wasn't worried about what I looked like, what was going on, what was happening in my job. You know what I mean? Anything. It was just in the moment, fully present. And we've talked about being present on several episodes. And so ultimately, the weekend to me represented that peace, hope, being present, and just really connecting. And so that's where I was at with the weekend.
Yeah, that's great. I love that connection portion and the being present that you talked about. And I'll share my day a little bit too. But I wanted to start with, you know, you were talking about like the structure of what Easter is with the collective consciousness being more associated with a Christian religion. I would like to share what I believe about it, regardless of the day. Like Easter doesn't necessarily have a distinct meaning for me in that respect. But what I do believe and what I do have conviction around is that Jesus was an enlightened energy, right? He was here in human form. He was here, in my opinion, to show us what a human with emotion, with blood, with all of the things, our DNA, you know, lungs, heart, like not in spirit form, completely in human form, could do in the earth energy, walking earth, right? He showed us this. And to me, what he showed us was that energy of what you call service and unconditional love, right? He walked the earth living that. And so for me, what I reflected on yesterday is not giving my life to him, right? But it is, how do I emulate what I believe he stood for? Right? If you were going to write down Jesus's energy or what you would expect a God to be, right? If you were going to write those characteristics down and how they would approach life, and then read those back to yourself and ask yourself, do I do that every day, all day long? Am I showing up in that way? Because I've seen these rings, what would Jesus do, and yada, yada. But are people actually taking that and learning from that and then projecting that? And unfortunately, right now, the world would not be in the state it's in if that were the case.
For sure.
So we all have a space in that. We all have the ability to do it, but you have to become aware of what you're doing and really make an effort to shift what that energy looks like. So that's my belief around Jesus, regardless of whether it's Easter or next Tuesday.
Yes.
I try to really, think about how do I bring that energy to life in my daily actions? And am I perfect at it? Absolutely not. However, I've become better and better and better at it with the more that I can become aware of it and reflect on situations where I didn't show up the way maybe I wanted to in the best form, give myself grace, and then reestablish, okay, that's all right. I can do this next time. I can show up and be responsive versus reactive, whatever that looks like. And And it's interesting because I do believe in what Myra was talking about. You know, she is just a beautiful extrovert. Like, I love Myra's energy in crowds and the way that she can. I've seen her. I've seen this happen many times. Complete stranger turns into her best friend at a social event, you know. She has that talent and that extroverted energy. It really serves her. I am a little bit different. I do love connection with people, but I also replenish through connection in a more subdued space, right? Either by myself. Like yesterday, it was really important. I just spent the day with my husband and I dogs. It was super important that I made it to the mountains because nature is where I can really connect and recharge my batteries, if you will. And so that's what I did. I did it, well, if I was going to grade myself on like my connection to my phone yesterday, I'd probably have to say a C, which really sucks, but I'm being honest. Because I got up, was on social media at the beginning of the day. Then I did pretty well and then took a few photos in the mountains and posted them. So I could have done a little bit better, but I really did try to be present in the moment, present with whatever I was doing. So I have to call
Yeah.
myself out, then I hold myself accountable a little bit more.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, I did like super good. And then I noticed I was not doing so hot either. I was like, oh, there I go back. Wee. And then it wasn't even useful, like I wasn't even, like there's beauty in, digital, being in the digital world,
Sure.
especially
Yeah.
with like your role, like if it's in marketing or advertising or influencing, or et cetera, or whatever it is. You have a business and you need to promote it. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's beauty in all of those things.
Yes.
And even this podcast, I
Yeah,
have to, we post about it and
we
we post
do.
on TikTok
Yep.
and YouTube and you
Instagram and
it's yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So
Yep.
it's everywhere and that's just part of it. We want people to know about it. No one would know about it if we weren't on the in the digital world. But I think it's mostly just being intentional about it, and I've said intention about 300 times. Maybe if we put a drinking challenge or, whatever beverage of choice, water, beer, wine,
Fireball.
I don't even care. Yeah, whatever it is, how many times to say intention or what we said last week, you could like play a game with it. But yeah, and I think it's really trying to be in that headspace. And so again, being aware, I'm aware now. We've talked about it. And so I'm like, I'm not guilty or shameful about it either. It's like, okay, maybe I've, spent a little too much time, maybe I should chill, or whatever. And then like yesterday though, I never felt myself looking for my phone, and especially after it
Mm-hmm.
died, it was just a brick, I was like,
Yeah.
ah, well, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also part of it too, is it's, we've talked about it before, it's an addiction, grabbing, reaching, touching, it's like cigarettes, there's a whole movement to it,
Mhm.
or whatever you want to compare it to. And yeah, it's just unlearning those things. And so I'm not going to be perfect at it by tomorrow either,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, so it was good.
But probably like after, bringing it back to that peace that you said you felt and the ability to really connect, you did have to be present with the people, right? So
Exactly.
not being on your device, not reaching for it when it died. Sometimes when I've left my phone
Hmm.
or like my phone has died, it's almost like I have a different sense of freedom.
I know. It felt
You know,
nice. It's
it's
like,
interesting.
I'm free. Yeah.
Yeah.
No one can touch me. I don't know.
Yep.
Because I think that's something to call out too is part of I had many conversations this weekend, and one of the things too with our phones and technology and it's you're always accessible. And I think that's really where it starts interfering with peace of mind is being accessible or people feel
Mhm.
like you're accessible. And that shows up for me a lot. I have a several people in my life who, if I'm not accessible, they're upset that I'm not, or they just automatically believe that I am for them 24/7. And that's just something that's happened because we have all the instant gratification, the message, the call, the whatever it is. And there's beauty in that, of course, but I think that's also part of the being free. I'm not instantly accessible. You can't reach me. And that I think was really nice about it too, is I didn't have to respond to, Joe Blow over here, or answer this phone call here, and then talk to my aunt and uncle here. It was just here. And this is the only time and space that really mattered. It was the only thing that was truly tangible to me in that moment.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. You talked a little bit about peace. And I just wanted to touch on that a little bit too. I was listening to one of my favorite mentors this weekend, and she was sharing a story about when her parents were ill at the end of their life. And she is a very organized, very feisty, very knows what she wants kind of energy, right? And when she went to her parents' home, her mother was dying of Parkinson's. She was sharing how she got there and she was organizing it, the way that she felt like it would be best, and not really thinking about what her mother would want or what makes her mother comfortable. And it was really interesting because she said she had to recognize that that was her comfortability, right? Her peace. But that wasn't her space to make peace for herself. It was for her to make peace and comfortability for her mother, not for her. And just, I've really loved that story because so often we're playing into our ego or our own shadows, and we're asking somebody else to shift something for our comfortability. You know what I mean? We're asking somebody to change something in their behavior or change something in their environment or whatever that is for our own comfortability versus showing up in absolute unconditional love and just being in their space the way that they need you to be in their space. And that's something I've had to really recognize. I can tend to do that sometimes. Feeds my ego a little bit, feeds my comfortability.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I feel like that is a really good example because it's a physical space, and
Yep.
altering the physical space. I think about it too in relationships. It kind of goes hand in hand with, and it doesn't kind of, but it goes hand in hand with expectations that we place on others. And a lot of the times those expectations are what's going to make us comfortable in our environment. And so, I think about, here's another, situation with a space. So my aunt's house yesterday was really, really hot. And like I was getting a little hot, and if I'm getting hot, then it's hot, and poor Blake's, if it barely, he's a Wyoming guy, he's going to be
Yeah.
hot it's just over. And I'd never once asked to open a door. I never once said, could you turn your air on, or complain or get upset or say, hey, I could have left. But it was interesting because when we left after the evening was over, Blake was like, man, it was really warm in there. And I said, yeah, but that's her home. And it's not for me to wonder if she has air conditioning. It's not for me to ask. Now, if we were all bowling, if it's endangering someone, a little different. But
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
her home. This was her space. And I physically was a little uncomfortable. That's more of like a very physical example, but it was her home. And I told Blake, I said, if it was that bad, then it's for us to leave, not for us to change her space and not for us to change her home or to mess with the temperature or to open her doors or windows, because she was happy in that environment. She wasn't upset. She didn't complain. She felt good. She has a son and he was fine. And so that made me think of that too, whereas that to me is more of like this, one of those things that would happen in the subconscious, or maybe not thinking like, oh, you think you're altering the space for someone, but really it's for you. And like I said, that's more of a physical example, but it made me think about that.
Well, yeah, it is. Most of the time it is for us, right? Because like what you're sharing is you made the conscious effort to go, this is her home. She's comfortable at this temperature. It's not hurting me, right? I'm not going to die because of it. I might sweat a little bit and, have stinky armpits, but other than that, all is well.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of times then we justify our behavior, right? We justify it with, and then we go into judgment. So justifying it like, well, my God, what does she want me to do? Sit there and sweat to death? Of course I'm going to say something, right? So we go into the justification of it, and then that leads to judgment. And without awareness of it, you have no chance of changing those behaviors, right? So often we just are what I call reactive versus responsive. We don't think about what we're going to say or what we're going to do. We're very reactive. And it's because we want the situation, the conversation, the physical environment to make us feel comfortable and familiar, regardless of the other people. right? And when we do that, it shows us little shadows of ourselves if we're paying attention. So everything's a mirror at us, right? Nothing is happening out here that isn't something that's going on in here. So it also gives us insights to, okay, what is that showing me about myself? What is that showing me in my shadow that I might need to take a look at, right? Because I was sharing with Myra, this is something I'm not loving that I'm going to say this on this podcast, but this is something I have committed to do, as be completely transparent and vulnerable, because that's how people learn. And I was sharing with her, and I honestly do not remember the exact details, or I would share it, but there was a situation with somebody, and I just remember feeling like this is the little devil I talk about. I don't believe that there's a devil angel that you're going to go to hell. That doesn't exist in my world, but there is the devil within ourselves, the monkey mind, usually, not the heart energy, but there was a little bit of discomfort happening for this individual. And I had to recognize there was this little smiley face in my body, like I'm saying smiley face, where I kind of got a little joy out of it. And I was like, oh, whoa, okay, this is interesting. I didn't get mad at myself. I didn't act on anything. All I did was become aware that there is something inside me, inside my shadow, that found a little bit of joy in somebody else's discomfort. And that has to show me that there's something within me that has that same level of discomfort. The same level of discomfort. It may not be one for one. There's something for me to work on there that I feel uncomfortable within myself about.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that too, and I agree. It made me think about, when you were talking to me about it earlier, I think about like terms like vengeance, or being vindictive, or jealousy, or pain, suffering of others, and it can be even as simple as, I've gone through many situations in life, as we all have, and someone might have hurt me before, and I've been like, and something bad happens to them, and I find joy in that, and that's horrible, but it's being aware and saying, okay, well, that's not love, and that doesn't. What is going on with me and my, like you said, what's making me uncomfortable, and what discomforts do I have to work through, and what reflection am I putting out there around that situation? It's so, I think this is one of those things that's so justifiable by people, especially I think too about when relationships end, and things I've heard either myself say or people say, when they're going through hard times too, like, oh, well, they should have stayed with me. I've never said that. I genuinely would never say that in a million years, but I've heard there's a person in my life that definitely says that. And they're like, I'm sorry, I just don't, that's just not how I talk. I don't give a shit. See ya, or like
Like if they would have stayed with me, their life would
would have
be
been
this
better.
beautiful
Yeah,
situation. Gotcha.
exactly. And so that is not in my vocabulary, and I would totally admit it if it was, but that is not. There's an individual, and that's a lot of the language they use around their exes, part of their relationship. They also use a lot of, they discovered the word narcissism and narcissistic, and what are narcissists. And they are very great at labeling ex-females in their life as narcissist, which I know what it is. It's maybe, I don't know. It's not for me to sit there and analyze these people. Okay, but for them, that's shadows around themselves. And to me, I know it's just a projection and a reflection of themselves and the things that they're saying about other people. And they do find joy when, like, their lives are a little chaotic or interesting or a little quirky or weird or whatever. And they're like, yeah, well, if they would have stayed with me, it would have been just fine. Or like, oh yeah, when they were here, they had it great. And there's a lot of language like that. And those are those things that I hear people say, I've heard people say, and there's this little like one-off around it where it seems so casual, but it's not casual. You know what I'm saying? Where you've heard, maybe you haven't heard people say those things, but they.
No, I have, yeah.
Okay, and it's
Of
like,
course.
I don't know if some people laugh it off. They're like, ha ha ha. But being more aware, you can hear the way other people are projecting and talking about being satisfied with the discomfort of others. And I've really picked up on it a lot, especially when they feel like the scales of justice are being balanced, where they might have been wronged and now they're feeling that they're righted. or they're right or justified by something happening to this person and that caused harm to them. And it's those things that I feel conversationally have become such a norm. And it's because people aren't aware of really what they're saying or how they're saying it and what's coming out of their mouths around these situations and how that's being projected. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is such a cool way to talk about it. And I love that you talked about like people get this weird justification around what you called the law of balance, right? We just did an episode on karma,
Mm-hmm.
which is truly everything has to be balanced. This is the crazy part that people don't get. That's that spiral that they continue the karmic energy with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you said something earlier, everything is about intention. Everything has what is your true intention around what you're doing? You know, that story I shared, where that one, my mentor was helping her mother. Was her intention to go and help her in unconditional love and let her feel comfortable in her space? Was
Mm-hmm.
that her intention? Or was it the intention that she had to adjust her life and she was going to make herself feel comfortable? Two different intentions. So, like what you're talking about is and I hear this all the time, and I'm not immune from this, right? Because I've heard lots of people, well, that's their karma. They got what they deserved. That is putting out the intention of like enjoying the energy of fear and hate.
Mm-hmm.
And, instead of being in a loving energy and being a little more empathetic, right? Like, I don't know why that situation's happening to that individual, but I can send love to it. I can find empathy for them. Those are two different intentions. And when you go with the first one and you have that justification and that almost enjoyment out of seeing it, it keeps that karmic energy alive for you too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You bring that right back into your existence. And people don't understand the spiral that creates. It can be continual forever because time only exists in our little space here.
Mm-hmm.
Eternally, man, you could play that out for many, many lifetimes in
Yeah.
many different ways until you really become aware of your part in it and how to neutralize that.
Yeah, and it's what came to mind too is I can feel when people are reveling in my circumstances or they find joy in my discomfort. And it goes back to we've touched on it before, and I'm sure we'll continue to touch on it about sharing your goals, your plans, what you're doing, what's going on, because it's an energy exchange, and then they take on that energy, and their energy gets exchanged back, and then it's I've mentioned before too where I went through the limbo of not knowing what job I was going to have that's one of many examples. I went through limbo of not knowing what home I was going to buy or, been many limbos. And in those times, I knew the people and I knew where the energy was coming from. I could feel it, and I could feel there was joy in people knowing that my home sat on the market for a little longer than it needed to. I could feel that people enjoyed that I had to live with my mom for a little bit, and that they felt like I was humbled. And it's even people close to me and people close to my family, because they viewed me and my life in one way, and they continuously were like, how could you have X, Y, and Z from this or that? Maybe I should have done what you've done. I don't even, just weird shit, jealousy. But when I was in these moments, instead of people trying to lift me up, or there are people close to me, instead of even saying like, hey, are you cool? Or whatever, I could feel them like enjoying it. And so I was very selective when I shared when things were moving forward with who I shared it with, because I didn't want any of that negative energy to impact things moving forward for me in my life, whatever that was at the time.
Yeah.
But I think that you can feel it, and when people are reveling in it, and it's not even, I don't know, somebody might say, oh, you're paranoid. I was not paranoid. I knew it. I could feel it, and I knew where it was coming from. And I think I was aware of it too. Or not that I knew I was aware of it. And so I had to really, we talk about cord cutting or not
Mm-hmm.
taking on the soul contracts or releasing that negative energy, whatever that looks like, or for whatever the situation is. And I felt that I needed to do that extra, like super, super much. So, and it's sad because when I was sharing like what Easter means to me and what your belief of Christ and being unconditional of love, I did not feel a lot of love from people during those times. It was like they were enjoying that, like, oh, she's getting her turn, or whatever,
Yeah.
weird shit
Yeah.
like that. And I wasn't getting a turn, I was okay. I mean, it was fine, or life or whatever. It was a moment, a season, a speck of dust in the grand scheme of time, and you're right. You said earlier, if people were truly of unconditional love and service, the world wouldn't be the way that it is today. And, and I'm sure you felt that too, Tressa, and I'm sure others out there have felt it too. And it's one of those things that I can see how it made me feel and the way that energy felt. And it helps me to be aware of, okay, so how am I feeling towards other people where they're in moments or in situations, instead of trying to change it to make them feel comfortable because I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I love that you talked about like the individual maybe saying, well, you're just paranoid. That is exactly what people would say when you feel the energy, because everything's energetic. You know your truth, but they try to manipulate it through the words, right? We do this all the time, right? You feel the energy, you understand the authenticity of it, and then somebody tries to manipulate you through words, right? We do it. And I laugh, as well, I shouldn't label this, but women do this, or I used to do this a lot. I don't anymore. You're mad at your partner or your spouse or whatever, and the classic answer when they ask if something's wrong, and, oh, I'm fine. Well, you're not fine. They can feel the energy of you're not fine at all, but we're trying to manipulate them into believing something through our words. And that's what that individual, if they're saying you're paranoid, does. And it's so interesting because so often what you're saying is so true. It's happened to me more times than I would love to count, that the people that you label, we talked about labels in a few episodes, one of our first episodes actually, that we have labels on that are supposed to, because of those labels, be it mother, sister, father, brother, whatever that is, love us with just tender care, are usually the ones who have the judgment around it, right?
Oh,
Are
for sure.
usually the ones who kind of get this little joy out of your discomfort. And I know for you, some of that was true in that situation.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and it's interesting because then that's heavy on us, right? Because we expect something different from those
Exactly.
individuals.
Yeah, and it also made me think too, like when people want you to be doing certain things, also, like we've obviously started the episode with religion and church. So here we go in our nightcap of it.
Let's just wrap it up in a bow,
Let's just
Mara.
go with it. Yeah. Throughout my life, if I'm not dressing a certain way, or I haven't acted a certain way, or I didn't go enough to a certain service or church, or participate enough, or do enough, or whatever the shit, um,
Mhm.
people would say things like, hey, is there a reason you're not going? Or why are you late? Or why would you wear that? Or why would you do that? Or blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure everyone's heard it regardless of what facility you've attended or where you've been. Now that I have a lot of words to give it, that's just shame and guilt. And it's because they're uncomfortable with something. And so they believe I'm making them uncomfortable when I'm fine. I'm genuinely thriving. And it's interesting because X, Y, and Z equaled success, whatever success was. Am I successfully a Christian? Am I successfully dressing a certain way? Am I successfully acting a certain way? Or whatever it is, that was their definition of it. And I've really gotten, I don't even know if that's correct grammar here, but I've been a lot better around navigating those types of situations. I don't actually go into an argumentative mode anymore. I don't even get defensive. I just state, like I joke because I told Tressa earlier, my niece calls it my work voice, and I think she's just labeling it because it's not diplomatic. It's the truth, but I'm not using anything that's, because a lot of times when we are defensive, or we go in defense mode or attack, or we're in aggression, we're using hurtful words on purpose. So then again, what is my intention of what I'm saying back? Because I'm not trying to fight fire with fire, whatever expressions people
Mhm.
associate with it. I've really learned to process what I'm being told. And then how am I going to relay it back where I'm truly sending out love with what I'm saying back? It's not to hurt them, not to start an argument, not to, because their beliefs are their beliefs. And
Yes.
I've learned to
Yeah.
accept that too. That's what they believe, and I'm okay with what their beliefs are, but I'm not going to change who I am or shape or mold into the version that they think I need to be to make them feel comfortable with themselves.
Yeah.
That's just, I no longer will do that, and I will never do that again. And so it's communicating those things back, like,
Why do people call this late at night? Sorry.
you're good. But I no longer need to fit or be this person that they think that I need to be. Or, I feel like to being authentically who I am is enough. I know it is enough. And if I'm in my authenticity and I'm living in my joy, that's all that matters to me. And I'm not causing harm to anybody, I'm not hurting them. I also realized too that it's very interesting what, like, even when we talk about religion or we talk about love or intimacy or friendships, partnerships, any sort of connection, it feels like if people can't see it on the outside from these stereotypical ways or labeled ways or whatever it is the idea of the world needs it to be, they don't believe it's real or it's happening or it's there. And so a lot of what I've really understood with how I'm talking back towards others and not being aggressive or not going in defense mode is really stating that I'm able to be calm and state what I need to say because I'm in my truth, and I'm 100% in my truth, and I know what's true, and I know what my relationship is and what I wear, and if I go enough to a service or if I don't go, or if I sit here or sit in the back or sit in the front or sit down by the river or go in the mountains or whatever I'm doing doesn't define what my relationship is with a variable of things,
Mhm.
because I know what it is to me, and that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And that is when somebody can find their true authenticity, is what you're talking about. You don't have to be reactive anymore. And so, like your niece talks about your energy being what I call responsive.
Mhm.
Not very many people in the world, it's getting more and more because I believe people are working on raising their vibration and
Mhm.
truly understanding their true authenticity, their true purpose, not what societal structures or religious structures or parental structures or whatever structure has programmed them to be. And when you can find that for yourself, you don't have to have that reactive energy anymore. You can sit in your responsive energy, and you don't need somebody else to perform a certain way to make you feel something anymore, right? As you talked about, like, people bringing that up or their belief structure, their comfortability. If they're wanting you to adjust to make them feel comfortable, they're definitely not in authenticity. They are playing out patterns. They're playing out what somebody else has taught them to believe, whether that be, like I said, from their parents, from societal structure, whatever that looks like. So that should be their clue that they probably need to dive in and look at what that authentic self can look like, right? And when you talk about unconditional love, I know when I do spiritual couples counseling or spiritual counseling. But when I work with couples, the first things I talk about with them is I don't really subscribe to the fact of compromise in any relationship. Because when we think about that, and you're asking somebody that you claim you have love for to compromise, that means you're asking them to not be who they are.
Mhm.
You're asking them to not live their authentic self. And
Exactly.
that to me is the opposite of love. And it always comes back every single time to your own authenticity, your
Mhm.
own self love. It comes back to your solar plexus when you get into the chakra system. Because when you feel authentic about yourself, you have true self love. You are not asking somebody else to make you feel something. And compromise always is asking the individual to make them feel something they're not.
Mhm.
Right. And so I love that you brought it back to you have been working on and are finding this foundation of authenticity. And now your family's seeing it, but it's almost an uncomfortability probably for your niece.
Oh, yeah,
She
they
would
don't like it.
rather, yeah, she would rather have the reactive energy, because that's the familiar space that she's used to.
Mhm. Yeah, it was. it was interesting, and I'll share this experience because it's really funny looking at it now. But I was going to go with my brother and his children and take my daughter to the Minecraft movie. And she looked at me and she said, "Why?" I mean, it just revved up like an engine. Like we all know, we're a chihuahua. So sorry, niece. But she just went, and I'm like, oh God. And I mean, and like, you don't know the lore. Why would you go see the movie? And got super defensive about it. And I just looked at her and I said, well, I don't need to know. I'm going to the movie with your father. You are not going to the movie. So I'm not really sure why it matters if I go and see this movie or not with my child and his children. And then it just hurt her feeling. I mean, she got more upset about that, I think, than if I would have yelled at her.
Yeah.
And I I called her later and I said, hey, hello. And she's like, well, I'm glad I'm upset. And I said, yeah, I know you're upset, but I didn't say anything wrong. And then, she said this side of hers. And I get what she was trying to say is like, hey, you're not going to understand the back history. I don't give a fuck. Who
Yeah, why would
cares?
you give
Who
two
gives a shit?
shits?
Like, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
it was hilarious. I enjoyed the movie. It was great. I enjoyed it. I got to go with my brother and his kids and my daughter. It was right after a
Mhm.
birthday party, so it was like birthday weekend blowout, like having a great time. Who cares? And she wasn't going. If she was going, maybe, but still it didn't matter. And it was just this, I don't know where it came from. Actually, I think I do know where it came from. Probably, fear of like, why are you guys going together and I'm not? And then she held a lot of anger and aggression the whole day. There was just a lot going on with her. And it really just fully blew in that moment about going to see the Minecraft movie. But what I told her to, and I let her talk about it and we talked about it, and I told her, I said, I'm not going to fight you about this situation. I love you and I hate that you feel that way, but this is where I'm coming from. It didn't impact you, so you're not going to dictate if I go see a movie or not, or
Right.
what my evening is going to look like, right?
Yeah.
And but I told her too, I said, and I explained where I'm coming from of not being so reactive about it. And so maybe if anything came from it, she saw an example of a person not screaming and yelling. Like I didn't
Mhm.
need to go into that space. And that's something that I've really shared a lot with her, where I used to wear arguing like a badge of honor. I used to be honest, it's disgusting to even admit it, but
I know, I love it.
it's just
That's
saying,
good, yeah.
but I used to also, like, I reveled in the fact that my words could hurt people. Like,
Mhm.
don't piss me off because I'm going to
Yeah.
really destroy you. Like, let me go, bro. Now I just hurt people's feelings in a different way, but it's not intentionally trying to hurt them. I'm just coming from a place of love, and it's making them upset for no, like, they're upset, and it's because it's the truth. And I've always been a person who delivers the truth. If you want the truth, you call me. And I've really learned to, I used to deliver a lot of the things that I say, and I catch myself in times too very soft, because I deal with a lot of really soft people that are very emotional, and I've had to navigate, especially with my mother, and like how I say things, because if I said anything, it was, oh, you're mean, because I'm expressive. Obviously, think about the tone of my voice this whole episode.
Yeah.
And to her, I'm arguing or being disrespectful, and I've never intentionally disrespected my mother. I know it's just not who I am either. But it's the truth that makes people upset. And but now if I'm giving advice or having a conversation, or we talk about conflict being healthy in workspaces, in a professional matter, but conflict in life is healthy. You need that balance of conflict. I'm not going out and fighting people, but it's a healthy discussion, and we're not agreeing on something, but I'm learned a way to navigate those things with my delivery and my tone, and to come from a place of love, truth, and and being truly me. And I'm not doing it out of anger. I'm not doing it out of hurt anymore. And I'm really delivering a message I feel needs to be delivered to this individual. How that individual responds to that is not me. It's not I
Mhm.
have no control over that.
Yeah.
And I'm not there to change them. I'm not there to make them like what I said. I'm not there, but I'm not using my words to destroy. I'm using my words. Honestly, I've been trying to use my words to heal. Like that sounds cliche and cheesy too, but it's really where I'm at right now. What am I saying to somebody and how are they going to take that? Because I have a lot of weight that holds in my words because I am a truth sayer. I mean, I really deliver what no one else is going to tell you, but it's no longer out of malice or anger or hurt or pain. I'm coming from a place of true love. And now I know what that feels like.
Yeah. As you kind of talked to me a little bit about her reaction to you going to a simple movie, it just brought me back to a coach I had a few years ago, and he talked about the problem is never the problem, right? The movie was never the problem. It was her emotion that it invoked that was the problem.
Exactly.
Whether that be jealousy, feeling left out, the anger that she felt throughout the day that she needed to release, and you were the person she was releasing it on. But the problem truly is never the problem.
Exactly.
Right? And, you talked a little bit about talking to people and letting them have their own space. And I love some of the words you used when you were talking to your niece, because one, you acknowledged her feelings and you acknowledged, I hate that you feel that way, but you didn't have anything to be sorry for and you didn't apologize. You let her be in her own space. So it's kind of goes back to that theory I was talking about earlier around compromise. We don't always have to be in compromise. We can be in this neutral space with each other that says, I hate that you feel that way. I really do. I am currently not responsible for your emotions or your feelings. Like, I truly did nothing that I need to apologize for. Sometimes we have, right? But in this situation, you hadn't. And so you just acknowledged where she was, and I held a little empathy for her and then moved along. So often we're programmed into, that justification or judgment energy, or that's where we get into that reactive state, right? It's just instead of just letting it be neutral.
Yeah. No, I agree. I definitely, it's very different. And, it ties back into being at peace, where I'm at peace with myself and I feel peace. I know what true peace, serenity, calm feels like. What state can I truly be in? And when I'm talking with others, whether it be conflict or a debate or just a conversation, what state of me is coming out through that, and I could have never talked to her again, which would have been this, silly and ridiculous.
Exactly.
But honestly, I was texting her like normal after she was choosing to hold the anger and be upset. I knew that I needed to just have the conversation with her and that would allow her to move on. But, if she chose to hold a grudge over that, then that's on her. But I wasn't, I'm fine. I genuinely was like, okay, well, here we go, I guess, sorry. Yeah. I mean, okay. But yeah, it's true. It's, I'm do not hold on to those types of things. I truly do not hold grudges. I really work through moving on very fast from situations once it's been discussed or whatever it is. And truly, I hope that in the situation, for whatever reason it needed to happen, maybe it was a lesson for her to see somebody, like I said, react in a different way. And then someone to also, like, in a healthy way, move on, in a healthy way, have a discussion. Because around her parents, they hold grudges and it's like one up against another. And like, you did this and now you did this, and and so it's
I call it tit for tat.
Yeah. So it's a healthy relationship with an adult that's supposed to feel a certain way.
Yeah. I think that was great. And it kind of comes back to close out our episode. I think we've been going about an hour now, and this has been a great conversation. Like, you will not find peace until you find authenticity for yourself. And truly what that is very unique to each one of us. So hopefully in this episode, you've gotten some insights or something to think about, or something that'll make you, kind of go inside and ask, what are my actions, my emotions driving me to see about myself? And sit with yourself. One of the hardest questions, which is the craziest thing that I ask clients that they cannot answer, is, I want you to tell me what brings you joy without using, I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a marketing director, I'm an analyst, without using labels. Just what brings your soul energy joy? And that is really, really tough for most people to even respond to. So,
Absolutely.
something to think about until next time. Keep your vibrations way high.
And stay sassy.